Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be diving into something, well, kind of unusual.
Yeah.
The world of character creation. Now, you might be thinking, like, what does that have to do with relationships and
Yeah.
personal growth and all the stuff we usually talk about?
Excellent.
But stick with me on this one.
Yeah.
Because our source material today is going to be shining a light on human nature in ways that I think are going to be surprisingly relevant
Oh, absolutely.
to your own life.
Yeah. Our main source today is Mastering Prompt Engineering by Conrad Reichert. It's a guide to using AI for content creation.
Interesting.
Now, you might think that's a weird place to start when we're talking about understanding people better.
Right.
But what Reichert does in this book is he really breaks down the elements of compelling characters
Okay.
in a way that I think is going to help us understand the folks around us,
I love that.
even ourselves,
Okay.
a little bit better.
So it's like using this
Yeah.
AI lens to understand people.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I think it's a really unique approach
Yeah.
that can provide some valuable insight.
Yeah, because we talk a lot about, understanding dynamics in our relationships and
Right.
seeing things with fresh eyes. And this is going to give us a new framework
Exact.
to do just that.
Think of it this way, whether it's a novel, a movie, or even just like our own stories that we tell ourselves
Right.
about our lives. A good story hinges on compelling character.
Yeah.
Right. And what makes a character compelling?
Yeah, that's the big question.
That's a big question. Well, Riker starts by diving into the idea of archetypes.
Okay, archetypes. So that's like the classic hero.
Yes.
The villain.
Yes.
The trickster.
The lover.
Right.
You know, these familiar patterns we see in stories over and over again.
And let's be honest, in real life too.
And in real life, absolutely.
Right.
So we see the hero in figures like Harry Potter. We see the villain in someone like the Joker, the trickster in Loki. These are like the starting points, almost like blueprints
Yeah.
for understanding a character's core function in the story.
Okay, so you've got these archetypes
Yes.
as like the foundation. But the book really emphasizes that truly compelling characters
Yes.
are more than just these archetypes.
Right.
They need depth.
They need depth,
And that depth comes from their flaw.
their flaws, their vulnerabilities.
Okay, so this is getting interesting.
Absolutely.
How does that play out?
Well, think about Frodo from Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
He's like the classic hero.
It's a
right?
hobbit.
The little hobbit.
Yeah.
Who has to go on this epic quest.
Okay.
But he's incredibly susceptible to the corrupting power of the ring. That internal struggle, that vulnerability, I think,
Yeah.
is what makes him so relatable.
Right.
And it makes his ultimate triumph
Right.
that much more powerful.
Okay.
Right. Because he's overcome.
He's not perfect.
He's not perfect.
Yeah.
He's flawed. And I think we as viewers or readers connect with that.
That makes him more human.
It makes him more human.
So you're saying a character without flaws is just
Well,
not going to work.
I mean, look at Jar Binks from Star Wars, right?
Oh, yeah.
Intended to be purely comedic,
Right.
lacking any real depth or flaw,
Yeah.
and it kind of fell flat.
People hated him.
People hated him.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show, I think, that flaws are not weaknesses
I like that.
in character development.
Yeah.
They're what make the characters feel real,
More interesting.
human, and ultimately more interesting.
Okay, so we've got these archetypes as this like foundation.
Right.
We layer in the flaws to give them depth. What else?
What else?
Makes a character really come alive?
Backstory.
Okay, backstory.
Understanding a character's past experiences is like having the key to unlock their motivations and their choices.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right. It's about understanding why they do what they do.
Okay.
You know, not just what they do, but why.
Okay, I like this. So give me an example.
Okay, so Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice,
Mm.
her desire for financial independence
Right.
is like this driving force behind many of her choices.
Makes sense.
And it stems from the limitations that were placed on women in her society.
Right.
Right. So without understanding that context, her actions might seem less driven, less clear.
Okay, so it's like you're saying
Yeah.
backstory is context.
Backstory is context
What's
for
your-
understanding motivations.
That makes a lot of sense.
Or think about Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Like, his expertise as an archaeologist
Right.
isn't just a random skill. It's what enables his adventure, right?
Right.
His ability to decipher ancient clues,
Yeah.
navigate dangerous tombs.
Yeah.
It all comes from that background.
That makes sense.
So his backstory informs his actions and makes him, I think, a believable inhabitant
Of his world.
of his world.
And it makes me think, even in our own lives, like understanding somebody's past
Yeah.
can give us so much insight into their current behavior.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We don't just judge people based on
Yeah.
what they're doing in this moment,
Exactly.
but we consider where they came from,
Yeah.
what their experiences have been, to understand why they might be behaving in a certain way.
It's about seeing the whole picture.
Yeah.
Not just the surface level actions.
So we've got archetypes,
Yeah.
we've got flaws, we've got backstory.
Right.
anything else that's key
Oh, yeah.
to making a character come alive?
The book talks a lot about how dialogue
Oh, dialogue.
can be like this window into a character's soul. Right?
Yeah.
It reveals so much more than just the words that are being spoken.
Well, yeah, because we can tell a lot about somebody just from how they talk.
Exactly. Their accent, their choice of words, their tone, their pause, their hesitation.
Like all those little things.
All those little things add up to create this really unique voice for each character.
Right.
Effector dialogue, I think, can reveal a character's education, social,
Okay.
even their current emotional state.
That's interesting.
You know, so think about Holden Caulfield
Okay.
from The Catcher in the Rye. All his angst, his cynicism, it just pours out
Oh, yeah.
in his unique way of speaking, his slang,
It's all right there.
his constant critique of all the phonies around him.
Yeah, and contrast that with somebody like Ron Swanson in Parks and Rec.
Exactly.
Completely different way of talking.
Totally different,
Right.
but equally revealing about who he is.
Yeah, his deadpan humor.
Yes.
His love of simple pleasure.
All of that is in his laconic speech.
Right.
His avoidance of anything too flowery,
Too emotional.
too emotional. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because you think about like those moments where you meet somebody and you just kind of know,
Right.
based on how they talk, whether you're going to click with them or not.
Absolutely.
It's like dialogue is this secret code that reveals who people really are.
It reveals who people really are.
Right. And in stories, you know,
Yeah.
the dialogue needs to be consistent.
Exactly.
It has to ring true
It has to ring true.
to that character's personality and motivation.
To the motivation. Yeah.
So we've covered archetypes,
Yes.
laws, story, dialogue.
Right.
What else do we need to know?
Oh, this is a big one.
Okay.
Characters are not static.
Meaning,
They change and evolve over time.
makes sense.
You know, due to internal conflicts, external pressures, or significant events.
Like they go through stuff,
They go through stuff
that changes them.
and they change as a result.
Okay.
This is called character evolution or the character arc.
Right. So like Frodo again
Frodo again.
starts out innocent little hobbit,
Yeah.
but that ring
Oh, that ring.
starts to corrupt him.
Slowly but surely.
Right. And it changes his personality, his actions.
His action. Yeah.
Classic example of character arc.
Classic example.
And a kind of tragic one at that.
Yeah, it is a bit tragic.
Right.
Think about Elizabeth Bennet.
Okay.
Her initial prejudice
Yeah. Toward Mr. Darcy.
towards Mr. Darcy
Right
is
from the-
slowly broken down as she learns more about him
Yeah.
and challenges her own assumptions.
Okay.
So it's a beautiful example, I think, of how
Her own growth.
personal growth can happen through self-reflection and challenging experiences.
Okay.
And then there's Tony Soprano
Oh, yeah. The Sopranos.
battling those inner demons,
Right.
trying to find redemption, but often backsliding into his old habit.
So it's not always a straight line.
Not always a straight line. No.
Right.
His attempts at self-improvement through therapy
Right.
are both humorous and tragic.
Yeah.
And highlight, I think, the complexities of character evolution.
So you're saying like character arcs can be positive,
It can be positive.
negative,
Yeah.
or even just like flat.
Or flat. Yeah.
Right.
The key is to create a journey for them, right? A path that feels believable.
Right.
And reflects, I think, the complexities of human nature.
It makes me think about how
Yeah.
we're all constantly evolving in real life too.
Absolutely.
You know, changing based on our experiences, the people we meet. It's a never-ending
It's a process.
process of growth.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this leads to another crucial point.
Okay.
The world around them.
The world around them.
The book emphasizes how a character's environment shapes them.
Okay.
Their culture, their history, societal norms, all of these play a role in making them, I think,
Okay.
believable inhabitants of that world.
So like Frodo wouldn't be Frodo without the Shire.
Exactly.
Right.
Without that hobbit culture.
Yeah, of peace and simplicity.
Peace and simplicity, that
Yeah.
environment shapes his values.
Yeah.
His initial reluctance
To leave home.
to live home.
Right.
And Elizabeth Bennet,
Okay.
her actions, her sharp wit, her social commentary
Right.
are all deeply rooted in the societal norms
Ah.
and expectations of Victorian England.
Okay.
So without that context,
Yeah.
I don't think her character would be as impactful
Interesting.
or believable.
So you're saying characters don't exist in a vacuum,
They don't.
right? They're a product
They're a product
of their environment.
of their environment.
And understanding that environment is key to understanding them.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's really fascinating how these principles, even though they come from a book about AI,
Right.
are so relevant to understanding people
Yeah.
in the real world.
It's like a secret decoder ring
It is.
for human nature.
It has a secret decoder ring for human nature.
I love it. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's
Yeah.
dive back into mastering prompt engineering a little bit.
Okay.
So Riker goes into a lot of detail about character archetypes.
He does.
And he really emphasizes that.
Yeah.
These aren't just boxes to put characters in,
Right.
but they're starting points
Starting points.
for creating depth.
Exactly.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about
Yeah.
how he approaches that.
Well, he looks at the hero archetype, for example.
Okay.
But he says, the most memorable heroes
Yeah.
often defy expectations.
Uh-huh.
And he uses Frodo again as an example.
Okay.
Right? The humble, unassuming hobbit
Yeah.
is kind
Yeah.
of this unexpected
Right.
yet powerful hero.
It's not the classic warrior archetype
It's not the classic warrior archetype.
that we might initially think of.
Right. And it's often those unexpected heroes
Yes.
who resonate the most.
Absolutely.
Right. The ones who find strength and courage
Yes.
from within.
From within, exactly.
Okay. So you got heroes and then you got villain.
Right.
What does he say about creating compelling villain?
Well, he says it's really important.
To make sure our villains are more than just pure evil. Right. So he uses the Joker as an example.
Okay, Batman's nemesis.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And he talks about how, that mix of charisma and chaos makes him both terrifying and fascinating.
Right.
And it's that complexity
Yeah.
that makes him such an iconic villain.
So a purely evil villain
Yeah.
is just boring.
It can be predictable and one-dimensional.
Right, because you always know what they're going to do.
Exactly. You know what they're going to do.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got hero, we've got villain. What about
Yeah.
the lovers?
The lover. Oh, this is a good one.
Right, because every story's got
Every story's got a love story.
some element of love.
Right, and he reminds us that love and passion aren't just plot devices.
Right.
They're powerful forces that drive character choices,
Okay.
create conflict,
Yeah.
add emotional depth to stories.
But give me some example.
Well, he talks about Romeo and Juliet,
Classic.
the classic love story. Right, and how their love is
Yeah.
both beautiful and tragic.
Right.
And it highlights how love can defy societal norms and expectations.
It's like a powerful force
It is a powerful force.
that can overcome
Yes.
all sorts of obstacles.
And then you've got Jack and Rose from Titanic.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Their love story is brief
Yeah.
but intense and I think forever etched in our memory
Because of the tragic ending.
because of that tragic ending.
It's interesting because it's like
Yeah,
those tragic love stories that seem to stick with us
they do.
the most.
They do.
I don't know. It's like the intensity
Yeah.
of the emotions the sacrifices made.
The sacrifice is
Memorable.
memorable.
Yeah, I think so.
But ultimately,
Yeah.
Riker stresses that no matter which archetype you start with, the key is to go deeper.
Deeper.
Right.
He encourages us to think about,
Yeah.
the character's hopes, dreams, fears, vulnerability.
To make them feel like real people.
Not just these two-dimensional cutouts.
Exact. Archetypes provide a framework, but it's the individual details that really bring them to life.
I love that.
So it's about going beyond the surface level characters
Right.
and getting into their heads.
Understanding their motivations.
Understanding their motivations.
Their complexities.
Their complexities, yeah.
So much more to it
They're
than just saying, oh, this is the hero, this is the villain.
exact. And he argues that
Yeah.
relying solely on archetypes can make characters feel flat and predictable,
Right.
to truly make them memorable.
Yeah.
I think they need a mix of positive and negative traits.
Because nobody's
Nobody's all good
all good or all bad.
or all bad.
It's that interplay
It is.
that makes us human.
That makes us human.
So going back to our examples,
Yeah.
you got Frodo,
Frodo,
virtuous, but susceptible
susceptible to that ring.
to the ring.
Yeah.
And then Jar Jar,
Jar Jar.
just purely comedic, and it
Uh-huh.
just didn't work.
It didn't work.
Yeah.
Lacked that depth.
Okay.
And that leads us back to this idea
Okay.
of how a character's environment
Right.
shapes them. And Riker dives into this in detail.
Okay.
He emphasizes that understanding a character's
Yeah.
cultural, historical, and societal context
Mm-hmm.
is really key to making them believable
Right.
and relatable.
Because we can't separate a character
Gene can't
from their world,
from their world.
right? Like their environment influences
What it influences.
their values, their beliefs,
Yeah.
their choices.
It does.
Like Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games,
Great example.
right?
Yeah.
Her actions, her rebellious spirit are directly shaped by
Yes.
the oppressive society that she lives in.
Exact. It's a product of her environment.
So Frodo, again,
Yeah.
his Hobbit upbringing,
Yes.
their culture of peace and simplicity shapes his initial reluctance
to leave the Shire.
to leave,
Like
to
me.
go on that quest.
And contrast that with somebody like Mad
Yeah.
Max.
Mad Max,
Totally different environment.
totally different
Yes.
post-apocalyptic wasteland.
Yeah, survival is the only goal.
Right.
So he's resourceful.
It's a direct result
Direct result.
of that harsh environment
Right.
that he's had to adapt to.
So it's like you're saying a character's world
Yes.
isn't just a backdrop.
It's not just a backdrop.
It's integral
It's an integral part of who they are.
to who they are.
Yes.
It shapes their values, their motivations,
Yeah.
and their flaws.
Even their flaws.
It makes me think about how
Yeah.
You know, our own environments shape us too.
Absolutely.
Right? Like our families, our communities,
Mhm.
the societal norms we grow up with.
Yeah.
It all plays a role in who we become.
And that's what makes this exploration
All right.
so fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, we're not just learning about
Right.
creating fictional characters.
It's about understanding
Yeah.
what makes us human.
Right.
What shapes our identities, what drives our actions.
That's so insightful.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but Riker doesn't stop there,
No, he doesn't.
right? He goes on to explore more specific techniques
He does.
for developing backstory,
Yes.
creating believable dialog crafting those character arcs that keep us engaged.
Yes.
So are you ready to dive back in?
I am ready to dive back in.
All right, so let's get into this idea of using psychology
Okay.
to craft these more believable characters.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see how this works.
Well, Riker starts by emphasizing the importance of understanding basic human needs and motivation. And he actually draws upon Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Okay, yeah.
which, you know, suggests that humans are driven by a series of needs,
Right.
starting from basic survival.
Food,
Home
shelter.
shelter, exactly.
Right.
And moving up to things like love, belonging, and ultimately self-actualization.
Right, so we can use this to understand what drives our character,
What they're striving for.
what their goals are.
Exactly. And how those needs might come into conflict.
Right, because sometimes
Yes, they do.
our needs are in conflict.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Maslow's hierarchy.
Maslow's hierarchy. And then he goes on to talk about the big 5 personality traits.
Okay, remind me what those are.
Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Okay.
So understanding these traits can help us create characters with really distinct personalities
Interesting.
and behavioral patterns.
Okay.
It's like creating a psychological profile
Oh, that's interesting.
for each character.
So we're not just like randomly
Randomly.
assigning traits.
We're thinking about how these traits interact and influence the character's action.
It's like building a real person
It is
from the inside out.
from the inside out.
I like that.
And he reminds us
Yeah.
that it's not about making characters perfect.
Right, nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect.
So where do the imperfections come in?
Well, he talks about cognitive biases.
Cognitive bias. Those are those mental shortcuts.
Those mental shortcuts.
That can lead us to
Irrational thinking.
make bad decisions.
Flawed decision making.
Right, and we all have those.
We all do.
Moments where we act impulsively or
Yes.
we make a choice that we later regret.
Absolutely.
It's part of being human.
It's part of being human.
So how do we use that?
Well, he says by incorporating these biases into our characters,
Right.
we can make them more believable,
Right.
more flawed,
More human.
and ultimately more human.
Okay, give me an example.
He uses Walter White from Breaking Bad
Okay.
as an example,
Yeah.
showing how Walter's high level of neuroticism,
Yeah.
his tendency toward anxiety and fear, really contributes to his downfall.
So it's like his personality traits set him
They do.
on this particular path.
On a path.
And his inability to manage those traits
Manage those traits.
leads to his downfall.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it makes you think about
Right.
how understanding our own psychology
and psychology
can help us
make better choices.
make better choices.
Well,
Yeah, avoid those pitfalls.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about like
Yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy. We've talked about the big 5. We've talked about cognitive bias.
Right.
What else does he?
Well, then he gets into the idea of character representation,
Character representation.
which he emphasizes as being so crucial
Go.
for creating a more inclusive and representative world in our stories.
Right, because we want our stories to reflect
The real world,
the real world.
the diversity
of the human experience.
So how do we do that? Well, he says it's about moving beyond stereotypes
Right.
and really crafting diverse characters that feel authentic.
Yeah.
And Malek to mention.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that everyone's story deserves to be told, regardless of their background or identity.
And how do we do that effectively?
He suggests really diving into a character's cultural,
Okay.
their upbringing, their personal experiences, and showing how these factors shape their perspectives and actions
It's about going beyond just like
beyond the surface.
surface level,
Exactly.
right, and getting to the heart of what makes each character unique.
What makes them tick?
This is really giving me
Yeah.
a whole new perspective on how to approach
Yeah,
understanding people, both in stories
I think so.
and in real life.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, okay, so
Yeah.
all this stuff about psychology,
Yeah.
super fascinating. But are you ready for the truly mind-blowing part?
Oh, lay it on me.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Riker goes on to discuss how AI
Oh, wow.
and machine learning are being used
Okay.
to assist in character creation.
Wait, AI creating characters?
I know it sounds like something
That's why.
out of a science fiction novel,
Right.
but it's already happening.
It's happening.
Riker talks about tools like character.ai
Okay.
that allow users to create and interact with AI-powered characters.
Wow.
These characters can hold conversations, they can learn and adapt.
That's incredible.
They can even surprise us with their responses.
It's like we're blurring the lines
I know.
between fiction and reality.
It's really pushing the boundaries. It's storytelling.
It is.
It's like these characters
Yeah.
are becoming more and more like real people.
They are.
Yeah.
They're responding to us in ways that feel genuine
Unpredictable.
and unpredictable.
It's amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
But it does make you wonder
Right.
about the ethical implications.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like, what are the potential downsides?
Well, Riker addresses that
Okay, good.
directly in the book.
Okay.
He talks about the importance of using AI responsibly, making sure that it's not being used to spread misinformation
Right,
or
right.
create harmful content.
Right. We don't want to create
You
like
are
some
the-
kind of
yeah.
Einstein's
Monster. Yeah.
Exactly.
He emphasizes transparency, diversity,
Okay.
and really using AI to amplify human creativity,
Not replace it.
not replace it.
Right. It's a tool,
It's a tool.
not a replacement.
Exactly.
Okay. So I like that he's addressing
Yeah.
those ethical considerations
He does.
because it is important,
It's important to think about those things.
right? As this technology becomes
Because it becomes more powerful,
more powerful, right?
and more prevalent.
Yeah. So what's Riker's final point?
His final point is the importance of collaboration. He
Collaboration.
reminds us that the best stories
Yeah.
are often the result of collaboration,
Okay.
of bringing together diverse perspectives
Right.
and talents to create something truly special.
Well, think about any great film or book.
Exactly.
Like there's always a team
There is
of talented people behind it.
writers, directors, editors, artists,
Right.
all working together to bring that story to life.
It's that synergy.
It's simple.
When all those talents come together,
When it works,
it's magical.
something magical happens.
It is.
And Riker highlights Pixar as an example,
He does.
right? And their collaborative process
Yes.
has resulted in some of the most beloved animated films of all time,
of all time.
right? And it's not just film.
It's not just film.
He talks about music,
Music,
songwriting duos,
bands.
where everything contributes their unique talents,
Exactly.
right? And when it works, it's amazing.
When it works, it's amazing.
But collaboration's not always easy.
It's not always easy.
Right.
There are challenges.
There can be conflict.
There can be conflict.
And Riker acknowledges that.
He does.
Right? So what does he say about how to...
Well, he emphasizes the importance of clear communication and mutual respect.
That's key in any relationship.
It is.
Right?
It's like any relationship.
Whether it's personal
Personal or professional.
or professional.
Yeah. You need that.
Communication is key.
Communication is key.
Yeah.
So he talks about
He talks about setting clear goals, communicating openly,
Okay.
and being willing to find solutions
that work for everybody.
that work for everyone involved.
That's a great approach.
It is.
And it applies to so many things.
So many things.
Not just storytelling.
Not just storytelling.
Yeah.
It's about creating a space where everyone feels valued and heard.
Yeah. Where creativity can flourish.
Creativity can flourish.
That's a great message.
It is a great message.
Okay, so that brings us to the end
To the end,
of our deep dive
to
into
mastering prompt engineering.
mastering prompt engineering.
Yeah.
What are your final thoughts?
You know, I'm blown away by the depth and breadth
Yeah.
of what we've covered.
Me too.
It's like we've been given this master class in human nature,
Right.
disguised as a guide
Yeah.
to creating fictional characters.
Right. We've gone from understanding archetypes and flaws to the power of backstories, dialogue, character arcs, all of it.
Yeah.
And we've connected it back to real life.
Yes.
And how these principles can help us understand
The people around us.
the people around us
Ourselves, exactly.
and even the future of storytelling.
Right, because we talked about AI.
We did.
And how that's changing things.
Pushing the boundaries.
Pushing the boundary. But ultimately,
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is
What's that?
this idea of collaboration.
Collaboration. Right?
And recognizing that the best stories
Yeah.
and I think the best outcomes in life come from working together,
From working together.
from harnessing the collective wisdom
Collective wisdom.
and creativity of a team.
Well said.
So, for anybody who wants to explore these ideas further,
Yeah.
I highly recommend checking out
Mastering prompt engineering.
Mastering Prompt Engineering, the art and science of AI content creation by Conrad Riker.
By Conrad Riker.
It's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It is, and it's a must-read.
A must-read
For anybody who's interested in
storytelling.
the craft of storytelling,
Yeah.
whether you're a writer, a filmmaker, or just somebody who wants to understand
The human
the
experience.
human experience more deeply.
I think you'll be surprised
Yeah.
by how relevant this book is to your own life,
I think so too.
your own relationship, your
Yeah.
own understanding of the world.
It's a great book.
It is a great book.
Thanks for joining us
Thanks, everyone.
on this deep dive.
Yeah.
Until next time,
Until next time.
keep exploring, keep learning,
Keep learning.
keep telling your story.
Tell those stories.